Hello, and welcome to the Crowley ISD PLC Curriculum Preview for English 1, Unit 1. I'm Sharon Graves, Secondary ELAR Curriculum Coordinator. I look forward to working with teachers and instructional leaders throughout the school year. Please feel free to communicate with me anytime for questions or additional support. Unit 1, beginning with Journey with Fiction and Literary Nonfiction, is 24 instructional days. The district has allowed 3 days for beginning of the year procedures. The instructional dates are August 28th through October 1st. The first assessment posting date for printing purposes is September 30th, and the assessment date is October 2nd. As per the local assessment guidelines, teachers are to administer unit assessments within 3 school days upon completion of the unit. For today's purposes, I will identify curriculum hotspots and provide comprehension instructional strategies, which include close reading using notice and note, anchor questions, and the fundamental 5. I will lead you through an analysis of the cognitive content and context of readiness standards. I will provide seed questions for your PLC. I will complete the content builder in the PLC for the reading PLC for Readiness Standard 1.5b. You will analyze the readiness standard in the IFD to gain a deeper understanding of how to use the standard to focus on student learning. PLC materials needed for today are your Unit 1 IFD, the TEK Standard Types document, and the PLC for Reading PLC. For the first 6 weeks, the curriculum preview will target Readiness Standard 1.5b. Based on the heat map displayed, please pause and discuss what conclusions can be drawn about this standard. Look at the question from the 2014 English 1 STAR that assesses 1.5b. What level of specificity is this question? Please pause the video to discuss this question and answer its alignment to the specificity of the standard. Now that we have identified our hotspot for Unit 1 as 1.5b, let's focus on learning by first studying the TEKs and then discussing the 4 essential PLC questions. Please locate 1.5b on your IFD. Pause the video to allow for everyone to turn to their IFD. What do we expect all students to learn? How will we know if they've learned it? How do we respond when they don't learn? And how do we enrich those who do learn? To set a purpose for reading, when we study a standard or bundle of standards, we read with this question in mind. To focus on learning, start by studying the standard to answer the first essential question, what do we want students to learn? At this time, pause the video to locate Unit 1 in your IFD on page 19. Let's review the level of specificity. There are 3 components to each TEK and SC: the cognitive, content, and context. For 1.5, students are asked to understand, make inferences, and draw conclusions. Notice the cognitive level of Bloom's, in which students are asked to think. The structure and elements of fiction are the content, the what, students are learning. The context is the how, in which students practice their learning. To make complex inferences, Figure 19b may also be assessed as a readiness or supporting standard with 1.5. Now let's focus specifically on the hotspot, 1.5b. This standard is part of Category 2, Understanding Analysis of Literary Text. Makes up 11 questions of the STAR Blueprint Assessment. On the EOC exam in 2013, 5 questions were asked, and in 2014, 3 questions were asked from Standard 5b. Please take a moment to pause the video and look on page 21 through 22 of your Unit 1 IFD. Review the standard and unit level specificity. What is the verb and the cognitive level of Bloom's? What's the content, the what students are learning? What's the context, the how in which students are practicing and showing their learning? Did you notice the Bloom's level of the verb analyze? The content is how authors develop complex yet believable characters, and the context is through the works of fiction and the steps in analysis. According to the standards, what do we want our students to learn? How will we make it relevant and rigorous for them? Take a moment to write the learning statement out. Then collaborate about how you can make the learning relevant and rigorous for them. How will we know students learned? This is what we look for in everyday instruction, the knowing. Do students know and can they demonstrate their learning? As we use the content builder, let's build our plan for learning with this question in mind. This diagram helps illustrate that when planning for instruction, it is vital that concepts be taught in connection with the process standards. Students use processes to acquire and demonstrate understanding. The tools to know process standards act as a stimulus for students by providing strategies and structures students use to access their learning. In English 1 and 2, Figure 19B is the tools to know process. Figure 19A is the ways to show, give students an opportunity to demonstrate their understanding and communicate an application of learning. Still looking at Unit 1 in your IFD and TEK 1.5B, please take a moment to review the placement of each TEK. Notice the first half of the unit, there's only one readiness standard, which is 1.5B, but the two supporting standards are essential to providing the foundation for learning. To understand the rationale of Figure 19 process standards, take a look at the highly tested Figure 19 for grades K through 12. Figure 19 process standards are the ways to show learning through Figures 19A, D, E, and F. Let's revisit question 2. During and after building a plan using what we know about process standards, we want to compose a response to this essential question: how will we know students learned? How will we gauge if students know and can demonstrate their learning to the depth and complexity of the standard? Please pause to discuss and write your response to this question. Remember that the supporting standards are the scaffolds of learning. They are the prerequisite skills students may need to begin learning the standard. If students aren't successful at learning the large concepts, or you know they have gaps that you need to attend to, start with what they should already know, and if needed, begin interventions with these supporting standards. Discuss the following question and what it may look like on your campus. How will we provide students with additional time and support in a timely, directive, and systematic way when students experience difficulty? Please pause the video to allow for team discussion. The fourth essential question to focus on learning is how do we enrich those who do learn? This question addresses the need to enrich students who are learning and take their thinking to a higher level. Teachers can differentiate the content and process and the reading text. They can differentiate by using centers based on students' readiness level or the complexity of resources. They can differentiate the why by providing deeper levels of reading and setting more in-depth purposes for students. As a collaborative team, it's very important to begin by aligning your understanding of the standard, the verb, skill, and context in order to reach the depth and complexity of each TEK. Your team should agree on what students must be able to do to demonstrate learning at the highest level. You should align the supporting standards to know where your instruction should begin. You should check for understanding through multiple formative assessments. Teachers should collect and review their data to make instructional decisions, and use team data to make your adjustments in your instructional plans. For this video, I will model for you how to use the PLC for Reading PLC tool. In the upcoming videos, I will use the gradual release model so that your PLC teams can complete this task independently. Short story is the text I chose to model the instructional strategy. The levels of thinking are establish a purpose for reading, use background knowledge, summarize, make inferences, ask interpretive, evaluative, and universal questions of the text. The evidence of learning is writing in the Notice and Note graphic organizer and listening to student discussions. And the learning strategy is close reading and cooperative learning structures to teach students to inference. Although the Notice and Note strategies can be used with short stories, literary nonfiction, and poetry, the 25 most commonly taught novels for grades 9 and 10 contain the 6 common signposts of Notice and Note. 6 noticeable features of Notice and Note are contrasts and contradictions, aha moments, again and again, tough questions, words of the wiser, and memory moment. Notice the sample charts with the text feature, anchor question, and literary elements that it supports. Signposts emphasize the text features that reveals the signposts and the questions that students should consider while they're reading. They represent what students should do as they read. They notice the clues in the signpost and the anchor questions that helps them understand. As you teach, create an anchor chart for your classroom wall. These charts serve as a great anchor lesson and remind students to always notice and note. Decide upon an order for teaching the signposts. Set aside time to teach each one, although some may be taught together. Teach each signpost lesson with a text that illustrates the targeted signpost. Use the gradual release model, and think about generalizable language you will use, which students can carry with them from one text to the next. The gradual release model works well with close reading strategy. Demonstrate the learning, then turn the task over to part of the class, then have them collaborate, and then they will do it on their own. Explain the signpost and the anchor question you're modeling. Tell students you'll show them how the signpost you're teaching works by sharing a short text. Read aloud to the first occurrence of the signpost that you're teaching. Read the second section, stopping at the next instance of the signpost. Reread the third section, perhaps a fourth. Read to the end of the selection, and then finally tell students to watch for the feature in their independent reading. Mark those they find. Write down their thoughts as they think about or reflect on the anchor question. This gradual release is not taught all in one day. It is a process by which students learn. Notice and note. The rationale of using notice and note is that it supplies instructional scaffolding by close reading and developing those lifelong learning habits. Creating skilled independent readers alerts students to what's happening next in the text. Encourages them to naturally use text evidence, encourages them to pay attention to specifics, and encourages inferencing. Each signpost has several graphic organizers students can use to show their evidence of learning. This is an example graphic organizer of contrast and contradictions. It serves as both a scaffold for learning and a demonstration of learning. It has text clues students look for to identify the signpost, as well as the anchor question to stimulate their thinking. This is an example of a student discussion during the reading of Tuesday of Another June. Students noticed the contrast and contradiction of June's close relationship with her mom, but June fails to tell her that she's being physically and emotionally abused by another girl named June every Tuesday at swim practice. Students are reprocessing, responding to the question, why is the character doing that? Later, students reflected and wrote about the most important signpost in this short story. They answered the anchor questions and formulated a theme statement for the text. Connecting reading and writing, students used their entries to begin writing a literary response to the selection. They had a thesis statement, text evidence, and the life lesson that was learned. Thank You Ma'am by Langston Hughes is another short story to easily teach students contrast and contradictions and other signposts. I appreciate your participation in the PLC curriculum preview. When you plan to implement Notice and Note reading strategies, please invite me in, as I would love to see classroom implementation, or if you would like for me to come in and model a lesson. If you have suggestions for future curriculum previews, please submit your ideas to my email on the screen. Also, I would love to hear from you if you have an instructional strategy that you would like to showcase in upcoming videos. Finally, please be sure to submit a copy of the PLC for Reading PLC document to your appropriate campus designee. Thank you so much.